Welcome everybody to 2023, the first community group of the year. I was thinking many years ago, I was in my early 20s, so you might say many decades ago. I was driving to work and I wasn't down, I was just maybe a little closed in of my routine. And I can remember going over Highway 18, that bridge there in Jackson, Mississippi, and I made a spontaneous decision and a right-hand turn. And I found myself in Man's Family Donuts. And that was a local family in our local church that owned this business. And to those that are curious, it was Shay Mann's parents that owned this. And the point is, it was just a few minutes out of my routine of having a donut and having some fellowship with a brother and sister that things changed for me. I might add, this may not be a good illustration at the new year if you're into healthier eating or a diet, but nonetheless, it was just those few moments. I was back on the road probably within 15 minutes. And the point is that sometimes just a few minutes of something new, of something fresh, that can change our attitude, our trajectory into the desired results that we want. So today, we're going to talk about vision. And when I say vision, I'm talking about a personal vision, a you vision. I'm talking about for your community group, and certainly talking about for our church. Pastor Gary Tracy says it this way: a fresh vision for yourself and those you lead changes the environment, gives people hope, and inspires them to look forward to a brighter future. So today, this is about investing or sowing into your world, the world that you live, your household, your oikos, the sphere of influence, the community that's around you. Let's look at that and let's see how it can make a difference. Now, before you hit pause for the first time here, I'm asking you as a group to get your Bibles or your electronic devices out and find Psalm 85. Because when I return, we're going to look at this for a few minutes. But before you return, we're going to just ask you to talk about a picture that's getting ready to be on the screen. And when you see that picture as a group, I'm just asking you what comes to your mind when you see that picture. Share with one another, and we'll be back for Psalm 85. Welcome back, everybody. And I'm sure there was a variety of interesting and noteworthy observations of that picture you just saw. And while we cannot dialogue, of course, I can only surmise that answers that you offered one with another would look something like the examples I'm going to give you that I, in fact, received from a previous small group that did this. Think about it. I imagine major categories like life was discussed, new life, something giving life. Another major thing that I could hear is growth, right? New growth, but not just new growth in general, but individual growth. How about potential? Did anybody go down that line of thinking? Development, possibility, something bursting open, fresh soil, freshness. Another one would be transformation. It's changing as it grows, and it's a part of a process. And there may be other nuances, like notice that green contrast to the dark soil. I'd like for us to look in Psalm 85, as I've already given you a heads up, in verse 11 and then verse 12. Truth shall spring out of the earth. That picture came to my mind that you saw just a moment ago. Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. Yes, the Lord will give what is good, and our land, you might see that soil there, will yield its increase. that budding, growing green plant. If I may just for a moment digress to let you know the setting of Psalm 85. It was written after the return of the Babylonian captivity of the nation of Israel. And so I want you to look at this as Israel really begins her prayer by appealing to the Lord's past mercies, yet recalling, as you can see here in verses 1 and 2, of how he had forgiven and restored his people. Check it out, verse 1. Lord, you have been favorable to your land, and you have brought back the captivity of Jacob. We're back in our homeland. You have forgiven the iniquity of your people. You have covered all their sin, Selah. You have taken away all your wrath. You have turned from your fierceness of your anger. Now, as you continue in this prayer that's being offered, the tone kind of reflects after the return of the exile, there was some spiritual decline. And so if you look in verses 4 through 7, just follow with your eyes there, that prayer acknowledges that their present troubles are indicative of God's displeasure. But then when you get in verses 8 through 13, God reassures them with an answer to that prayer. That, look at verse 8 and 9. The assurance is that God will again bless his people. Think something new, refresh, potential life. Look what it says in verse 8. I will hear what God the Lord will speak, for he will speak peace to his people and to all his saints. But let them not turn back to the folly. Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. And then the part that we read from here at the outset, verses 10 through 13, we see where God's sure mercies to his people, watch this, they spring from his covenant love. Why? Because he's faithful, because he's righteous. Then he will remain true to his covenant love. And that assures his people of our peace and welfare. Look at verse 11. Back to it again. Truth shall spring up out of the earth. Faithfulness is what the NIV says, shall spring up out of the earth. And righteousness will look down. It'll smile down from heaven. From heaven and from earth, God's covenant blessings will abound till Israel's cup overflows. Look at verse 12. Yes, the Lord will indeed give what is good, and our land will increase. It will yield a harvest. That verse 12 in the New Living Translation says, yes, the Lord pours out his blessings. Our land will yield its bountiful harvest. What's going on here? Look at the message in this same key passage. Verse 11, truth sprouts green. Think of that picture. Faithfulness sprouts green from the ground, that dark soil you saw. Right living pours down from the skies. Oh yes, God gives goodness and beauty. Our land responds with bounty and blessings. So the psalmist here is just saying truth or faithfulness just springs up out of the ground, just as plants do. That truth, faithfulness springs up everywhere. It abounds in all lands, plants, shrubs, grass, everywhere. What are we saying here? I'd like for us just to pause again, and I'd like for you to discuss a couple things. What are you seeing from Psalm 85, just the scriptures that we have perused here? And also, are you seeing any correlations between your observations of that picture and the scriptures that we're looking at? Take a few minutes to talk about it. So, as we're gathering back here, all the discussions you made about the picture itself, and now Psalm 85, of how truth and faithfulness and God's blessings sprout from the ground. Here's what I want to share. I just can't get away from this faith. This faith that something is going to burst and something is going to grow in people's lives. Your life, my life. Something in this year is going to change in our community groups and in our local church. What I'm saying is, I believe it's time to move, to act. It's time to invest. It's time to sow into the territory that we all love. And by faith in His Word, we will see the fruit, we will see the results in your life and in our world, our territory. When you use that word investment, I think that's synonymous with sowing in the agricultural example. It speaks of action, doesn't it? That you invest in something, but also it's the expectation of return, reaping, fruit, results. So in other words, if you invest money, you expect a return from the action you took of that investment. But all of this starts with trying to do something new. You got to be willing to take the risk to go to the bank and invest it. And I, with that in mind, take you to 2 Corinthians chapter number 9, verse 6. 2 Corinthians 9:6 says, "But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." Years ago, I was introduced, I believe it was by John Maxwell, to the shovel principle. So what kind of dividends or fruit, rewards, results, whatever word you want to use, what progress that you get depends on what size of shovel you use. It just makes sense. You can only gather the amount proportionate to the size of your shovel. If you're going to go out and shovel your snow, you can only pick up the amount of snow as the size of the shovel. And what we need to understand is God matches our shovel size. That same passage in the New Living Translation says, "Remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop. But the one that plants generously will get a generous crop." The Passion Translation says, here's my point. "A stingy sower will reap a meager harvest, but the one who sows from a generous spirit will reap an abundant harvest." And what am I talking about? Sowing seed has to start somewhere. And so from that small effort, from that small size of a seed, you can repeat, and you and I can reap large results as a person and as a group. I'm challenging us in this new year as a community group. Let's sow some seeds. Let's get ready for a breaking forth, a budding. I'm talking about people. I'm talking about places. But all of this starts with doing something new, doing something different, something fresh. And so with that in mind, I'm getting ready to introduce you to Valerie Jobs. She's been a part of Abundant Life since 2003. And the late Elizabeth Slack invited her to church as she was parked on Elizabeth's work parking place as she had a layover as a school bus driver. I want you to listen to her story, as I hope that somehow it will inspire you that doing just a little something different can have big results. Check it out.
I drive the yellow school bus, and I've been driving for 21 years. And I noticed this lady, and I felt a burden to pray for her. And I prayed for her for years. I noticed at times she was in a wheelchair, and from the wheelchair she was on crutches. And I continued to pray for her mentally, pray for her well-being, pray that the Lord would touch her and lead her and guide her. And I noticed, years later, I continued to pray. And one day coming into church, into the foyer of the church, the lobby, she was standing there filling out paperwork. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. God answered my prayers. Prayer works. And I continue to pray for her today.
So in conclusion, I trust that Valerie's story will inspire you to press meaning into what could otherwise be mundane routine. Ever since 2001, she drives a school bus. But when she sowed a prayer into her predictable world, God answered and blessed her prayers. And by the way, Valerie made a better choice with her routine than I did. I went and got donuts. She prayed a prayer that brought somebody to the house of God. But here's what I'm saying. Do something different. Start something. Revive something. Let's sow into our world the territory in which God has placed us. So, your final time together here, I'm going to call you to action, to sowing, to investing. And there's going to be questions that you're going to talk about as a group. And I want you to reflect on and answer them as to what you as an individual can do to sow into your world, to invest into your world, doing something new, fresh, but also as a community group. Check those questions out. And I'm believing it will produce some ideas that will lead to action, that we will see results because we used a big shovel.